for joining me today on Winston Creosote Godbold's Reaction Channel. My name is David, and today we'll be reacting to Episode 2 of Season 3 of Star Trek Picard. You may remember, as we discussed in our last video, we are going to be judging Star Trek based on 4 criteria to determine if it is living up to what I think good Trek is. That first criteria is the IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. Another way of thinking of that is how our differences combine to bring beauty and meaning. The second point that I am evaluating all the episodes on is radical empathy. The third is holding true to the Federation's values. I think it is great to have radical empathy, put yourself in the antagonist position and try to understand them as much as you can, but you've got to hold on to your own values as a Federation member. And the fourth one is what I call sense of life. Are we just having a good time? Is it hopeful? Is this a universe that I want to be in? So if you want to look at last episode, it goes into more detail on how I'm going to be judging those, but those are the 4 criteria I'm going to be using to judge each episode in the series overall to see if it is truly good Trek once again that we are experiencing. We begin this episode with a flashback 2 weeks into the past where Jack Crusher is on the Helios, which means mercy, and flying to a planet that I don't think is actually ever named, but he's going there to provide medical supplies and help for some kind of plague that is taking place out there. Something that I think, again, that sounds like some radical empathy and a good values there. But he's approaching that planet on the ship. The first thing that happens is he gets there, he reaches out to them, and before anyone responds back, some Fenris Ranger ships approach his ship and basically ask what he is doing there and to provide the appropriate Starfleet codes to have access to the planet, which Jack does not have. And he kind of smack talks them a little bit, and they decide, hey, we're going to board your ship and search it. So when the Fenris Rangers board the ship, they begin to look through the various supplies that he has on there, and he shows them, he begins opening up crates, various kinds of medical supplies and so forth. One of the Rangers opens up another crate, which of course has a little bit of Romulan ale. Now, it's the 25th century, we learned in the last episode, and all the way back in the 23rd century, Romulan ale was illegal. I'm still kind of surprised after 200 years it's not legal yet. What's going on? Anyway, that's just an interesting question. I mean, we're at peace with the Romulans. Why isn't Romulan ale legal yet? What does it do to somebody other than give them a really, really bad headache? But anyway, so the Fenris Rangers are looking through the ship, and they discover the Romulan ale, and Jack maybe tries to bribe him a little bit with it, but he steps away from that kind of deftly, and then says, if I was going to bribe you, I'd actually bribe you with these, and opens up a crate, and inside there are phaser weapons. That seems to work for some reason. It kind of surprises me, but it worked. Jack is happy with himself. He has a nice smile on his face, like he's accomplished something great. The Rangers take the guns and begin to leave the ship. But as the Rangers are leaving, one of them hits his comm and contacts the ship and says, let the marked lady know we found him. Now, when we're thinking of Vatic, the marked lady, I've always thought of those as scars, and they may well be, but the term marked lady, maybe there's more significance to that. Maybe she has been marked or chosen, is how I interpret that, for some kind of greater meaning than what I understand right now of the show. But anyway, so the Fenris Rangers leave, and then we move to current day, 2 weeks later. Now we are facing off with a rather large, scary-looking ship where we left off in the last episode. There's no communication between the ships at that time. It simply came into view, and it's like, hey, who's that? And nobody knows, including Jack. And I think Jack is telling the truth, has no idea who that is. Jack Crusher lets Picard know he's not certain who they are, but that he's been chased by the Fenris Rangers, not the group we just saw, but a few weeks ago, Fenris Rangers, Klingons, and then some Starfleet personnel who are all working for whoever is chasing him, someone who has great reach. And that enemy ship is here to attack. It's not here to negotiate. Picard, of course, wants to negotiate right away, see what they're looking for, and he makes clear that that ship is armed with all of its weapons are focused right on to the Helios, and that negotiation is probably not what they're here to do. The fearsome-looking enemy ship fires a volley of photon torpedoes, hits the Helios, shakes it up a little bit. They think that they're under attack, but in reality, what it had done is it had simply taken out the Titan shuttle that Picard and Riker had taken from the Titan to get to the Helios. So you do know that they mean business. They are not going to let them escape that ship one way or the other. That was their first thought, is get Beverly on the pod, or get Beverly's pod onto the shuttle, and then head out as quickly as they could and try to get back to the Titan. That option is now taken away from them. After the vessel has attacked the shuttlecraft, we actually transition to the Titan, and we find that Seven and Shaw are arguing about whether to do a rescue mission. Shaw is very clear he is not interested in doing a rescue mission at this time. And basically, he's looking at the enemy ship saying, look how powerful that is. It doesn't look like this is something that's going to be easily done. And Picard and Riker had made their own decisions to do these things, as had she. He then dismisses her from the bridge, which causes a little kerfluffle on the bridge. It reminds me of the days back on the original series where everyone would be like staring back at Kirk and Spock or McCoy or something like that as they talk to each other. Not quite as dramatic as they used to do back in the 60s, but they still certainly... it's demoralizing the crew to see the two superior officers fighting with each other over this, but Seven does leave the bridge. Welcome to Blade Runner World, which is what I call T. Metalis Prime, which of course is a take on Terry Metalis, the showrunner's name. And I guess it was first mentioned in Star Trek Enterprise, is when we first visit that planet. Looked like a very different planet back then, quite a desert planet. In any event, Rafi is feeling the pain. She was not able to prevent the attack on Starfleet in District 7, I believe, of Metalis Prime. She's in District 6, which looks like Blade Runner World to me. And so she has contacted her handler at Starfleet and said, hey, you know, what's going on? What next steps can we take? I want to get down and find out who did this. She's surprised to receive the message back from her handler saying, stand down, there's nothing we're going to do. Starfleet is happy that we've determined who the person is. They name a Romulan as a suspect, and she is very surprised at that because she thinks that it's far too obvious of a person that was far too easily traced. And so she is wanting to get in contact with Sneed, who is a Ferengi. So, hey, we're going to see what the Ferengis look like in the 25th century in the new show. And she brings up that she's got to find him, and her contact says, no, you need to stand down, you need to disengage. Hey, that's the title of the episode. So she basically is not satisfied with that. She ends communication and kind of is pounding on the railing of the La Sirena as she's kind of thinking of what to do next. We then return to the Titan, where Seven has not completed her discussions with Shaw yet. She goes in and talks to him again and makes clear that she's concerned that he will become known as the captain who let a great admiral and another captain die without even trying to help them. We don't know if that's going to move Shaw or not, but she's still keeping it up. She's still trying to make some points. I think that is a pretty good attempt to motivate him. On the Helios, we see Riker talking with Jack, and they're trying to come up with a plan of action to try to escape from the enemy ship. They have no idea exactly what to do that. And Picard is going around putting like little things on the walls with magnets, and I think that no one's exactly sure what he's doing. But when Jack asked him what his ideas are, he said, I'm not planning a strategy right now. I am simply trying to protect us. And all of a sudden, a transporter begins to try to beam Jack off the ship. But Picard has put up our transporter inhibitors. Nice to see that technology again. Something from the Next Generation series that we had seen. And it does work and prevents Jack from being taken off the ship. So what Picard feels he's learned is the enemy ship really does want Jack. It wants Jack alive. And we do have technology that can prevent that from happening. The enemy ship then beams some people down onto the Helios, and Riker throws essentially a grenade out there and disintegrates them. And so it looks like, at least in Picard's mind, that there's no real way they can keep beaming people onto the ship because they'll be able to pick them off pretty easily on the Helios. So they feel that they're at a stalemate. I think Riker even says that. But then you learn that it's not the case, and the enemy vessel activates a tractor beam and begins to pull the Helios towards it. So yeah, it may not be that they're going to beam on. They may simply pull that ship aboard their ship and board it that way. Boom! This is perhaps the most exciting scene in the episode. The Titan flies in. We've never seen anything like this, I think, in any Star Trek before. The Titan flies in between the enemy vessel and the Helios, sticks its saucer section in there, breaking the tractor beam link, and therefore freeing the Helios. So that's a pretty interesting thing. So apparently Seven has made some impact on Shaw, and he's now thinking a little bit differently about what we should do. So he's put himself right into the fray. What's interesting is the Titan seems to be a bigger ship than the enemy vessel. Certainly the Helios, probably the Helios and the enemy vessel together are not as large. But it does not seem to be as well armed as we'll learn a little bit more on later. And we've kind of heard earlier that the other ship's fairly well armed. So although there is a size difference, it does not look like the Titan is still in a good vantage point to take the ship on directly. We go back to Metalis Prime, and we see that Rafi is meeting with her husband, ex-husband. And she's doing that because her ex-husband, like her, in his past, used to have some issues and do some dubious things. And he has kind of moved past that life because after they had a child together, he felt the child was more important and put those kind of behaviors in his past. And he's talking to her about doing the same thing. Well, he, although he's put things in his past, still has contacts in the underworld, and one of those contacts is the Ferengi Schneed, who she wants to meet. And he's willing to give her that information and set up an appointment with Sneed, but he's basically saying, if I do this for you, you're choosing that life over your family, and that's how it's going to be. I'm not going to help you, make up with your son. And she chooses the Sneed approach. And again, I understand why she's doing that. That's the duty. She is trying to stop whatever's happening here from going farther. And so that is the decision she makes. It's a very hard one on her. It's a hard thing that her husband, ex-husband, put her in that position. But that's the decision she makes, that she wants to meet Sneed. Back aboard the Titan, we meet the crew from the Helios has come on to the Titan, and they are making their way to the bridge and kind of interacting with various people out there. Crusher is in sickbay, keeping in mind she's shot and trying to recover on that. The baddie in the show, the enemy, the antagonist, makes a contact to the Titan, and they bring that up. They start talking to her, and she makes very clear right away she knows more about everyone there than they certainly know about her, and probably than the individual people know about each other. She points out Picard's android body. She points out whatever has happened to Captain Shaw in his past, which again I think is some kind of event at Wolf 359, which makes him hostile toward people who have associations with the Borg. I don't know that to be true, but that's what I think. And so she points out some issues with him, and so she's making very clear that she knows exactly who she is engaged with, and that she has the upper hand. Vadic then tells the crew that Jack Crusher is actually a criminal, and she's simply a bounty hunter who's trying to collect her bounty on Jack, and that he has all sorts of bad things that he's done, and it's appropriate what she is doing here. Initially, Captain Shaw says no, the Federation does not work through bounty hunters, unlike the Empire. And in doing that, she responds to him that she's going to lower her shields and maybe scan her ship. And they do that and discover that she has multiple weapons platforms, not just the standard phasers and torpedoes, but a variety of different platforms of weapons, most of whom, quite frankly, I've never heard of. And they have some unknown weapon also on the ship, which I think will come in later, that they're not able to identify. So clearly she's making, again, a statement. Not only do I know you better, but I'm a much better ship than you do for fighting. And that has an impact psychologically for Shaw, more so than I think the rest of the crew. Now, like all good Star Trek episodes, the baddie gives them a ridiculous amount of time to come to a decision, which in this case is 1 hour. Give us Jack within an hour, or we're going to attack you, essentially. And that gives them a lot of time to try to come up with a solution, fortunately. And in doing that, though, before she leaves, she once again wants to demonstrate some technological superiority. She uses a tractor beam to grab the Helios and not just pull it towards her, but basically repulse it and throw it onto the Titan. The Titan is able to get kind of out of the way, but it does hit the ship, not any kind of major damage. But it's not something that any of the captains, we have 3 on there. We have Picard, Riker, and Shaw. None have ever seen that maneuver before. We get to hear a little bit from LaForge, the ensign there, saying that her father, Geordi, has told her that, hey, they're just using science, and that if you can use one line of science to attack, you can use it to defend, you can manipulate things like this that they've never seen before. Shaw seems unimpressed with that information. We now move to the conference room aboard the Titan, where we have Picard, Riker, and Jack talking again about what should be done next. Captain Shaw comes in with the security team and arrests Jack, and then makes clear to everybody in the room that Jack actually is a criminal, and that he has a lot of things within the Federation, outside the Federation, that are valid charges, And quite frankly, he's considering turning him over to the bounty hunter because, he needs to take care of the ship. That's the main priority that he has outside of Federation space. And these charges are legitimate. This person is not a good person, and he wanted to make certain everyone there understands that the person they're harboring is, in fact, someone who is on the outside of the law. And then Captain Shaw relieves Seven of Nine of duty. He's not just asking her to leave the area, he is actually relieving her of duty, and she's to go to her quarters. He's doing that for insubordination. Again, he tells Picard and Riker they're all going to get their due at the tribunal for what they have done. She'll get what she deserves, and Jack Crusher will get what he deserves. Picard does ask Shaw if he can speak with Jack to try to find out what's going on, to try to come up with some kind of plan. And fortunately, because the bounty hunter has given them an hour, he says, go ahead, we've got a little bit of time. You can go talk to him in the brig area. Picard moves to the brig, and he confronts Jack with his lists of crimes, some of which sound pretty serious. Terrorism, Binar 3, and killing a person, but we're not sure if the person's dead because, in fact, the person is a hibernator, and so they may simply be in hibernation. So Jack is trying to, I think, downplay some of what he has done and make clear that most people who are upset at him are just kind of low-level thugs and warlords, and that high-up people in the various governments are not actually that too concerned about what he's doing, because you have to take certain risks when you're trying to help people in marginalized communities and get them medical care, which is what he and Beverly are doing. Picard responds back that Beverly would never have anything to do with this, and Jack makes clear, you have no idea who Beverly is. You've not spoken to her for 20 years, and quite frankly, not only is she participating with me, she in fact taught me how to do everything that I do. Picard seems not to believe it, but essentially leaves because he's not going to get Jack. I think, I'm not sure what he's actually trying to do, but he doesn't get Jack to feel bad about what he's done. That's for sure. In the next scene, we get to meet Sneed, who is the Ferengi in this universe, the guy who supposedly was involved in selling this technology to the Romulan that was used on the Federation Recruitment Center, District 7 on Metalis Prime. And again, Rafi wants to find out who this person is and find out who he really sold it to. She does not believe the Romulan was involved. So she meets with Sneed, goes in there and starts talking to him. He is somebody who's very much interested in all things that are human, because everything becomes vintage that is human, and that makes it something that he can sell. So in discussing things with her, she comes up with the idea to try to convince him that she knows that it's not the Romulan who is involved because she works for him. Unfortunately, Sneed knows that's not true because, in fact, he killed him, the Romulan, to tie up any kind of loose ends that he would have. And he basically says that she smells like Section 31. He's not going to work with her unless she is willing to take a drug, which I think he calls Splinter, because it rips you apart and brings you back together again over and over and over. And of course, she has addiction issues, so this is a big issue for her to even attempt to do that. But again, she's going to try. She does take the drug, and it pretty much incapacitates her. But she then finds out that Sneed's going to have her killed. And she pulls out a knife, stabs him in the hand, but otherwise she's really not able to put up much of a fight because of her drug condition. So she looks like she's in some trouble, but her handler suddenly appears, takes out all these people with a piece of cake, beheads Sneed with a bat'leth. So we know that this is probably a Klingon, and it turns out to be Worf. So it's the first time we've seen Worf. We now realize that Worf has been paired up with her as her handler through Starfleet Command. So this is a big reveal, and it's nice to see her get away. I actually enjoyed the character of Sneed quite a bit. I think he stays true to the Ferengi that we've known from the past. I think the prosthetics looked, close enough to being the same. He talked the same. He's a little more dirty of a character than I think we would see with Quark. But I also think that this show allows you to show what the Ferengi might be like. Maybe this is kind of what Quark would be like, and was like on DS9. We just didn't get to see how dirty and unclean some of his, and evil some of his activities were. So Sneed, I think, was a very interesting character. We now know who Rafi is paired up with, and we now have another member of the original Star Trek The Next Generation crew as part of this show. Perhaps the most exquisite thing of this scene with Sneed, Rafi, and Worf is when we see Worf's face. The old Klingon music we're all familiar with from Star Trek The Next Generation. which I think actually goes all the way back to Star Trek, the motion picture, when we see the Klingons for the first time after, how many years it's been, 15 years since we've seen the Klingons on the original series. That, I think, is a great callback. I'm glad they're doing that. And again, I mentioned that in the last episode, that Terry Matalas is bringing in all the music, some of the sound effects that we're so used to. And I think it really just makes you feel very comfortable that you're at home when you're watching these episodes. Back aboard the Titan, Jack Crusher is working to get out of the brig. He has some type of little technology that he puts up there, tries to find out the level of the force field, which apparently you're required to tell a prisoner so they don't hurt themselves on the force field. And it's just a standard level 10 force field, folks. So apparently this little thing's going to work. He's able to escape the brig, so it looks like he's engaged in wrongdoing again. He's trying to escape. So the whole ship is set off on alert. You see Seven of Nine come out of her room, even though she's supposed to remain hidden there. And she has some security with her, and they're searching to try to find out where Jack is. She doesn't want this to go any worse than it already has for her Captain Shaw, is actually what I think there, and for her and for everyone else. I think she wants to nip this in the bud. As the scene progresses, we actually learn that it is not his intention to escape, but to go to the transporter room to turn himself over to the bounty hunter. He wants to protect his mother. So again, this is a good sign that Jack is not all about himself and just kind of all in his own world. So that's a positive thing to see. At this time, the bounty hunter does call the Titan again, has communication with them at the time, but Picard is actually wanting to contact them again, and Shaw does not. Picard keeps saying, we can make this person stand down if we just stand up to her, and the conversation does not go well. But it's very interesting because in that conversation, she mentions that the name of the ship is the Shrike. So I went and, based on her description, the Shrike is a bird. I went and looked up the Shrike on the internet, and they're beautiful little birds. They're very beautiful, and they're not that big. I mean, I think the biggest might be, like that big, but I guess they are. They're on the internet referred to them as the butcher birds. So they do sound pretty mean, even though they're beautiful, and they have a kind of nice noise that they make. So hey, I was fine with them. But she's named her ship that. It's not as fearsome as calling it the Eagle. But anyway, she's made her decision, and she lets them know that. And she lets them know that she will continue to tear them apart if they do not give her what she wants, which is apparently Jack Crusher. Captain Riker has gone to sickbay to bring Beverly Crusher to the bridge. Finds that she's healing well. He wants to wake her up. The doctor there's like, she's heavily, medicated, sedated. We can't really do that. He goes against her recommendations and wakes Beverly up and brings her to the bridge, where it's the first time in episode 2 that we see Beverly and Picard look at each other. They have this telepathic moment where she communicates to Picard that yes, Jack is his son. And at that point, Picard is very clear in his mind that absolutely not. We're not going to turn this person over to the bounty hunter. And Shaw, of course, is shocked by this. He's like, oh my God, what's going on now? He's like, he's my son. He seems, shocked. But now what I find interesting is with that information, Shaw seems more willing to help than he was before. And just being Beverly's son, he didn't seem to be that excited to help. At this point, he sits down in his command chair, types in a few commands of what he wants to do as a strategy with all the information that he has. Tells Picard, next step's up to you. Picard has seen what he typed in there. Comes up to Shaw, pats him on the shoulder, and then they are again talking with the bounty hunter on the Shrike, and he makes clear that he's gonna fight. He says engage, which is actually engaging with the commands Shaw put in, which I thought was kind of cool. And what those were is a volley of 3 photon torpedoes against the Shrike, and to run into the nebula, not unlike we saw in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, not unlike we saw with the Borg, and probably a variety of other episodes where hiding in nebula is a good thing because the sensors on both ships do not usually work. So that is where we are leaving them off with. Baddock, in seeing that the bounty hunter, I'll call her, Baddock, in seeing that they are going deeper into the nebulas, just seems giddy about this and starts laughing, asks them to follow behind. It's almost like she's playing with her prey. She doesn't seem at all concerned about it. I think she knows she has the better ship. And so she's actually just kind of laughing maniacally. It reminds me of the Emperor on Star Wars, just kind of how he seems happiest when things are going kind of crazy. So that is where we end this episode, and then we go to the absolutely beautiful end credits, which we discussed in last week's episode. And again, they're just quite moving. How again, Terry Matalas is bringing back the music from previous Star Trek to enrich this version of Star Trek. So when I review this episode on my scale of 1 to 5, based on my 4 criteria, I'm actually going to give this a 2 out of 5. Last week's episode was a 3 out of 5, and I thought about this pretty hard, but I came away from this and I'm feeling that there's certain things that are not making sense to me. I find Captain Picard's reluctance to accept that this might be his son to be disabling to his ability to make proper decisions. That doesn't seem like Captain Picard to me. I find his this just the scene. I'll probably get hate mail for this, but just the scene between he and Beverly where they're like looking at each other when she's kind of revealing that, I think is meant to be a very touching scene. It just didn't work for me for whatever reason. And I think it's strange that in 20 years she didn't let him know. So we'll have to find out what that's all about. But I think in some areas we're hitting on all cylinders, so to speak. But in other areas we are not. So I think that this episode kind of leaves me surprised by is that we're not following what I call the Federation values, which is the third point. And one of the things that I think made Discovery, Star Trek Discovery, not very fun to watch is that we are not behaving like Starfleet officers, although we're still acting and working within Starfleet. So I see that Shaw's behavior, where he's suddenly okay with them escaping from the enemy ship, I like it, but I think it's contrary to who he is as a person from what we've seen so far. And again, I think that in particular, Captain Picard, who is the star of the show, is not at all behaving like he is supposed to. That all being said, I am not at all disappointed in where we are at. The way I've heard this described is this is a 10-hour movie. And in every movie, you're going to have parts where you're kind of lining everything up. I now feel like everything has been lined up. We now have all the various pairings I kind of talked about in my first episode on Picard, in that you have different people paired up. You have Picard and Riker paired up. You have Beverly and Jack paired up. You have Seven and Shaw paired up, et cetera, et cetera. And so now Worf and Raffi are paired up. I think all that is in place. We're all going to be dealing with preconceptions and issues we've had with the past, trying to overcome those and move forward, which I hope will be a good arc for everyone. So although I put this at a 2 out of 5, I'm not at all disappointed in where we're going. I think it's just more of a setup episode that for some reason didn't move me quite as much as the first episode. So I look forward to seeing the first episode next week. And I hope that you will join me. Please like and subscribe if you've not already done so. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great day.